Welcome to the first episode of the Genius Podcast. I am your host, Karen Doyle, and I would like to invite you to join me and countless other Catholic women as we not only discover our own unique genius, but we own it, and then we bring it as a gift to the world and the people we do life with. If you are looking to discover what it is that you are called to do with your life, if you have a dream but you lack the confidence or the skills to take the next step, or you just need some great advice on living your vocation as a Catholic woman, then this podcast is for you. I hope and pray that you will come away inspired, and as St. Catherine of Siena said, set the world ablaze with your genius. To kick off the Genius Podcast, I have invited Renee Doyle to unpack with me what it means to discover your purpose and your passion in life. There is something deep within us as women that longs to make a difference, to share ourselves with others. But how do you do this when you don't know what it is that you have to give? Sadly, there are many women who honestly don't even think they have something to give. And there are others who know what their genius zone is, but they don't know how to give expression to it. The truth is that God has created each and every person with and for a purpose. What is yours? I couldn't think of a better guest to unpack this with me than Renee Doyle. Renee is possibly the most positive, infectious, most encouraging and joyful woman that I know. First and foremost, she's a passionate lover of Jesus Christ. She's been married to Mark for over a decade and is the mother to 4 children. Renee has been involved with Net Ministries Australia for many years, where she is involved with the formation and mentoring of hundreds of young people. Having been trained in the Clifton Strengths Finder approach, Renee has a huge interest and passion in seeing people discover their gifts and using them in service of the church and others. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with Renee Doyle. Funny thing just happened, didn't it? I sent you a text that was actually meant for my husband, Jonathan. So I said, Renee Doyle, Karen Doyle. I said it must be the Doyle connection, where I felt totally open to send it to you.
That's fine. That's
a little bit embarrassing. I said, lucky I wasn't declaring my undying love or having an argument with him.
No, that was very funny. Gave me a good laugh this morning, Karen, too. So thank you.
Just look at it and think, what the?
You know, it actually got stuck in my head, and I was trying to work out maybe was it a song you were singing or, you know, so I wasn't sure what you're, but either way, Karen, it brought me joy. So I was happy to receive your random text.
At least it wasn't a total marriage overshare.
That's right. I often think that I sometimes with texts I send, I go, oh, I really have to concentrate that this is going to the right person.
I have been so looking forward to this chat because I remember last year you and I spoke on the phone one evening for I think it was almost an hour and a half, and I got off the phone at 10:30, 11 at night feeling absolutely pumped. You just have such a beautiful energy and passion and vibrancy around, I guess, Christian Catholic womanhood and helping women really discover their gifts. And it's definitely been a journey that you've walked yourself. You just bring so much to this space. And the Genius initiative that this podcast is a part of is really around helping women discover, I guess, the genius of womanhood, but more specifically how they can discover their own genius and, I guess, bring that to life and to serve and bring it in a way that is abundant to those around them. So I'd love to have a conversation with you this morning just around, I guess, where our passion and our gifts meet the world and the need in the world, and how as women we can, I guess, activate those gifts and those passions.
Look, I thank you for having me on here.
Yeah.
I really was looking forward to this, and I too really enjoyed our conversation. I think time just passes easily, Karen. We're talking to you, and I love this initiative as well. It's something that I feel really passionate about. I think it's a really great way, and I love seeing you use your gifts and the things that God has put on your heart and the desires He's put on your heart to share that with the world. So thank you for stepping out and sharing that.
It's funny, isn't it? Because you wouldn't believe what I have been through in the lead up to actually launching this and doing it. There's a lot of doubt and a lot of, is this really worth it, or is it really going to be helpful? Don't you think that when we get close to stepping out, we can get consumed with, I guess, those doubts and the negativity that comes, that seeks to steal, kill, and destroy what God's placed within us to do.
Absolutely. I see it often that I think, especially what you say, when we're getting close to really stepping out, to being brave in an area, because I think it takes a lot of vulnerability to respond to that call in our heart, you know, and vulnerability isn't always easy. We, especially as women, I think as well, we're aware of maybe what will others think of me, and failure can be a thing. Yeah. Will I look stupid? Will I fall flat on my face? Will nobody listen? Is my gift really that good? Will it impact anyone? You know, all of these doubts that fear can really hold us back, I think. And I like that you reference that scripture too, because John 10:10 is one of my favorite scriptures that Jesus said, I have come that they may have life and have it unto the full. But just before that is really important, where it says the thief comes to steal and destroy. And I see that particularly as it shows up in many different forms of fear, or the things that hold us back, try and rob us of who we're called to be. Because as we step out in our passions and giftings and the person that God has created us to be, that there is usually that doubt that follows going, or even before, of should I do this, or I don't have what it takes. And that can almost rob us of becoming more fully the women I believe that we are called to be.
Amen. Preach it, sister. It's so true. So true. Jonathan and I were away. I was away at the Gold Coast for the 3rd January in a row this year. We escaped the bushfires and went up there for 2 weeks, and I was so frustrated because every year I've been there, I look back in my journal and I had written the same goals, and I was so frustrated because I hadn't actually seen them through to fruition. It's like, why is that? And obviously I'm a mum and my primary vocation is motherhood and to my husband marriage, but why is that? And obviously, you know, things get in the way, things happen with children, people get sick, husbands break both their wrists, you have to do everything for them. But like, you know, life happens, obviously. And I was really interested in that question, why haven't I done these things? And I think when I boiled it down, I got down to the fact that almost they kind of scared me. Do you know, like those dreams and the things that I felt like God had put on my heart almost seemed a little bit too big. And so in some ways, while, yes, life did happen, there was also an element that I needed to take to prayer to say, okay, well, is this, Lord, what you want me to do? If it is, show me the way and show me, you know, I guess my gifts and where I'm strong, and then where I need to upskill or what I need to let go of. And so I think you're right that there's so much that can come into our life to rob us of who we're called to be and what we're supposed to do in the world.
Yeah. Well, I think for me it started because I myself was one of those people, and I don't think it's something I've always been really aware of. It's something that I had to work at. And it honestly was actually born out of a time in my life that was very challenging for me. So back, gosh, I don't know how many years ago now, over 10 years ago now, my husband and I moved from Canada and to live here in Australia. And I thought that was everything I could have wanted. I was ready to come home after living overseas. But what I wasn't ready for, Karen, is the change of coming back home after so long, and that I had grown so much, and I had a job that I loved and people and friends that I loved. And I guess in many ways, I knew who I was when I was in Canada, or I felt like I did. Yeah. And when we came back home, I was trying to fit into my old life, but also I'd gone through this transition of becoming a new mum and kind of stepping out of the workplace and being home with him. And I loved that. That's what I desired. But also in that time, I just felt lost of what am I here for? What is my purpose? And I think because I started to just doubt I actually had anything to offer the world, honestly, or the people around me.
You really felt that?
I really did. And I'd say that stayed there, if I'm really honest, for a couple of years. And it was actually a really hard transition time for me. And in that time, just remember, just desperate for life, you know, and I think we experienced that at some level. We've probably all asked is there more to life than just going through the motions, you know, that we kind of have that deeper desire to make an impact, to really live this amazing one life that God has given us. And I know that was in my heart, and I just had no idea how to. And I felt so far from that in that season. And I think now I can look back and say, I think what I was really wrestling with was a sense of purposelessness, and just kind of trying to figure out who I was again. And like what we talked about, a lot of fear had crept into my life. And even in really small things like relationships, like, were these people still wanting to be my friends? Were they still accept me? Was I different now and they didn't want to build a life alongside me? There was some real fear and insecurity in that time. And it was quite dark from that perspective. And I remember just really having enough at the end and just praying. And I remember actually reading The Purpose-Driven Life. And
that's a great book.
It is a great book. And you know what? I threw the book across the room when I started because I was just so honestly, I'm going to be real, because I so wanted that. I so desperately wanted that. And I remember the first line in the book is, "It's not about you." And
really?
And I just, yes, that's the first line in the book, is like, you define that purpose. It's not about you. And I remember just coming back to prayer and realizing I hadn't even asked the one who created me.
Yeah, exactly.
And created me with a purpose and for a purpose, about my purpose and how he wanted me to use the gifts that he had given me. And I had looked so much outside or externally and kind of gone a lot to my abilities and had graded my own abilities. And that was just, it was bringing discouragement more than anything. So I had to kind of change my course direction and started to pray and started to read about things. And I guess my journey was just starting to pay attention. And I was learning a lot at the time of going, if God has created me for a purpose and he has given me these gifts and strengths and they're from him, then I don't want to miss out anymore. I want to use that. I want that purpose. And even in the little ways, not just in the big, in the little everyday ways of Monday to Friday, not just weekends and big momentous moments. So I found that as I started to seek that and search more, so often gifts and strengths were tied to purpose. And that's when I started that journey.
So what else did you do to help yourself, or what else helped you climb out of that season?
Great question. Honestly, I think I get confused now. There were a number of different things that happened at the same time, because I think there were a number of things going on for me. One of that was a bit of a faith crisis, trying to rediscover my faith as a mum. It looked differently. And it does in different seasons. So there was that kind of going on one side, and then there was the purpose and giftings and strengths, but somehow they were all drawn together. And that kind of came in that sense that I got of the scripture I talked about before of living life to the full. And I think I sat with that for a while and prayed with that of like, what does that look like, God? And at the same time, some friends were also asking me to step out and to use some of my gifts.
And so how did you feel about that in that season?
I will use one particular example that's very, very real for me. I remember a friend of mine asked me to give a talk at a conference. Now, I said no, and I said no, but if you know this friend, she is gifted at being persistent, and she kept asking me. And in the end, she's like, Renee, I know you can do this, and it's time.
Wow.
I said yes, and I didn't want to, Karen. I didn't want to. Oh. And honestly, if I'm being raw, because I think it's helpful to know that those months leading up to it, you would think I was going on some platform to the world. I felt so nervous. And so going back, I can't do it, and I don't have what it takes. And what if I don't say the right thing? All of these fears just circulated. To the point where the night of the conference, I remember I was about to walk out on stage, and I kid you not, I went to find my dad. Now, my dad is also a speaker, and I thought if there's one person in the room that can give this talk at the last minute, it is him, and he needs to. I cannot go on that stage.
Oh, you were going to give it to him?
I was going to beg him to go and do it for me. And instead, and I just remember there was just kind of this line. And as I walked out onto the stage, it's like, I know it sounds crazy, but it's like it wasn't me anymore. It's like that real power of the Holy Spirit, like that real presence of God just took over and gave me the courage that I needed. And I remember walking off the stage that night and I loved it. And I think about all the things that kind of affected me in that journey. And I loved being, more than just speaking, I loved being able to proclaim the truth that I felt was that God was asking me to share more than anything, that it was something that it was God was asking me to do. And I was responding to that. And I remember coming off stage and found a quiet moment and just cried, because I think, again, like I said before, I was almost robbed of that moment because of the fear and of all the things that were holding me back. And I remember just praying that night that God would continue to give me the courage to say yes, in the big and the small ways, in the little ways. And that I wanted to not let that, although I still feel that fear, and we do, I didn't want to let it stop me anymore. You know, I wanted the life that brought. And honestly, I can say in that season, it was a lot of saying yes to things. And I say yes on a stage, but it was also yes to coffee dates with people who I'm like, are we going to be friends? You know, like because of how I was and how fragile I felt in that season, and joining sports teams and little things like that. And I was like, but in saying that, life started to open up again for me. And that's not, it sounds dramatic, but I think it was, because
no, but I think it's the truth.
Scales fell from my eyes, and that joy came back in, and I was like, wow.
And it's a spirit of freedom, isn't it? Like I think that spirit of freedom kind of explodes in you once fear falls off you.
Yeah. Yes. And I think that's what gives me the passion to work in this area, is because I know what it feels like to feel like you don't have anything to offer, to feel like you don't have gifts or talents or a purpose bigger than just existing and going through the motions of life. The truth is we all do. And I think that's where my passion comes from, is I've tasted, you know, sometimes you hear people say sometimes your greatest pleasure is born out of your greatest pain. And I think for that season, at least for me, that was very true. And something that fuels me now is because I love being alongside people as they start to discover, wow, could this be what God is calling me to? Could this be that he's given me this gift to share with others, to bless the people around me? And that's a really beautiful thing.
It is so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And I love what you said about, you know, that fear and feeling like you just didn't have what it takes. And so often I think we also forget that we actually don't have what it takes. But when we're ignited with the power of the Holy Spirit, we do. And that's what you're saying, like that experience of walking out onto that stage and it was not you, and just having the Holy Spirit come into you and upon you, and you stepping out and into that. Yeah, it's just amazing. And I also think that God chooses people like that because there is a humility there, a humility of spirit, that we really are dependent on him. That I think, you know, anyone can go out on a stage and we can have an attitude of it's all about me, but really it's all about him and him in me. And I think God often chooses people with a spirit of humility because they know their lack, they know they don't have what it takes, and so they need to lean into him. And the whole purpose of us doing this, the whole purpose of us experiencing freedom and stepping out in our gifts is really to bring glory to God and to be bearers of him in this world.
That's right. And I think sometimes that's probably where my approach to fear changed, in going, it's not that it never is present, it is.
Yes.
You know, and often in every season, and to think it's just going to go away is probably not realistic. But it's like what you say, when you start to go, well, the fear is here, but I know that God will show up in the midst of it, and that I can do it afraid, so to speak.
Absolutely.
That's freedom there, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen. And because I think fear wants to contain you. It wants to hold you back. It wants to stop you from doing these things. And so if we still do it, you know, afraid, well, then we've got the power, don't we? In Christ, we've got the power. Listening to your story, I remember having a similar experience many years ago. We moved from my hometown a year after we were married to far north Queensland to live and work in a boys' boarding school. And similar to yourself, it was a time of real, a lack of purpose and trying to discover my gifts and what I was meant to do. I was an oncology palliative care nurse, to living and working in a boys' boarding school. It was like so poles apart experience. And I remember at the time, Jonathan and I also started to try for a family, and the first year that didn't happen, the second year, and we actually went walked a long journey of 6 years of infertility before we had 3 kids in 3 years. It was like God was like, here you go. But that was a really interesting season, similar to yourself, of just not knowing, I guess, trying to find my feet, trying to find my place in an unknown environment with new people, while also facing a bit of a crisis in my identity. Because I think as a woman, you know, the trajectory of our lives is often, we think the plan is, okay, we grow up, we have a job, we might go overseas, we get married, we have children. So for me, when I wasn't able to conceive a child, it was, okay, what does my marriage look like? But not only that, I began to internalize this idea that not only was my body failing, but that I was a failure. And so if I was a failure, then what do I actually have to offer? And it was similar to what you're describing, and it was for quite a few years, a real time of soul searching and of wrestling with these things before God. You talked about throwing the book across the room. I remember feeling really angry at God. And it's just real, but it's important to be real. And I remember in this season, I actually came across John Paul II's teachings on the feminine genius and womanhood. And in that particular moment, so I had 2 revelations. One was of my identity as God's beloved daughter. Before I was Jonathan's wife or a nurse or could become a mother, I actually had an identity, and that was as the beloved child of God. And the second revelation I had was just around John Paul II's teaching on the genius of womanhood, that he really promoted this idea that women have unique gifts and skills which need to be present in the world. And for me, that was important. It gave me hope, because regardless of bearing biological children, what his words were telling me was that I had purpose. My womanhood still had purpose. And so that was, just similar to you, a similar experience of that soul searching and really finding my place. But I find God actually has to bring us sometimes to the end of ourselves, doesn't he, before he can restore and bring about his purpose in our life?
Yeah, I think sometimes, like what I was saying before, is, you know, when I talk to people about finding their strengths and gifts and purpose, it's also exactly what you say, leaning into some of those hard times and times that we feel maybe at the end of ourselves, and what could be revealing about that, you know. Like I say, sometimes our greatest pain and also some of our strengths and our gifts are born out of the things that we can't stand, you know. Maybe it's passion about an injustice or a cause or something, and it's something that just gets you, almost like a righteous anger, you know, or hurt that you've struggled within your life, and you want to be able to help others walking through that, because you have a newfound incredible compassion to receive people with that, you know, makes you so gifted to be able to love and receive other people's walking through that. So sometimes I think, there is real beauty, even though it doesn't feel like it at all.
At the time, it all works out in the long run, doesn't it? Like he brings beautiful things from the pain of our lives. So, Renee, tell me about, like, you do a lot of work now around helping women, men and women, discover their gifts and their passion. Can you tell me a little bit about the work that you do now, and I guess the journey that you've been on from that place of being on that stage to where you are now?
Yeah. Well, as part of, again, of that, really what I would look back now as a real dedicated season of just trying to figure out what God was calling me to. And I think it's important to say that was a combination of reflection as well as action, because I think sometimes we can think, oh, if I discover it, then I can go live it. But often it's found in action. And as we try different things, we start to go, wow, I really enjoyed that. Or that really brought me life, and go, maybe I could do that again. Or, maybe the opposite was true. So for me in this season, I was reading a John Maxwell leadership book. He talked about his strengths and how he develops his strengths in this book. And he used an assessment, which is now referred to as Clifton Strengths Assessment. And I was really intrigued by his wording in that. And so I went and took the assessment myself that night, and as I do, made my husband do it as well.
Did you?
I love that. So I could understand him. And I found the language really different and quite unique to other ones that I had taken previously. And I loved the positivity that it was genuinely trying to articulate strengths and talents that you have, and give you almost a pathway to develop that. And that's something that I hadn't really got to, because there's something that resonated with me about developing strengths, because I almost go back, to the parable of the talents of we're not just given it so we can bury it and hold it for ourselves in our life. It multiplies as it's shared and given away. And as we give it away, that's where the life comes from. And it's that beautiful paradox, I guess, of the gospel, that as we give our life away, we find it. And I find that with our gifts and our strengths too, that as we serve others and bring, bless them with the little things that God has given us, that we find incredible joy and fulfillment in that too. And I think that that's just a beautiful way that God has made it, And so as I came across these strengths, for example, it's just different lines. So one of the lines of my top strength, which in their language is called individualization, and it talked about how you are naturally intrigued with the unique qualities of each person. It says you are a keen observer of other people's strengths. You are fascinated with how people work together and how different teams can leverage each other's strengths. And I'm like, hold on, that's not a talent. That's just how everyone thinks. And I think, coming back to the purpose thing that you and I were both talking about before, I think it infuses incredible purpose into the day-to-day life. When you feel like, hey, I've got this secret mission,
yes,
wherever I go, it kind of makes it fun, like
I love it.
Who can I chat to today? Who can I carve some time out for? How can I use my gifts to make an impact wherever I am, that somehow these mundane little things can turn into beautiful, extraordinary moments just because we're intentional about using the very things that God has given us each day,
I love that analogy of having a secret mission, because I'm a mum, you're a mum, you have 4 children, I have 3 children under 12, and you're right, like the mundane day-to-day grind of life can become a chore, can't it? But if we have a sense of purpose, then it elevates, I guess, the value of our vocation, the value of what we're doing, and makes it so much more important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I honestly believe that when you ask people about moments of transformation in their life, it's usually not, sometimes it is, but it's often not in the big events. It's often someone who believed in them, someone who encouraged them. And I love that, because it doesn't matter what season you're in. You might have a season where, you're bedridden, and that is really tough. And you can wrestle with, oh, what am I doing each day? And what, again, carrying that secret mission forward of, maybe you have the ability to encourage people and to send texts from that space, to just, or, to pray for people and to think about them. Like, you still have purpose, even when you feel like you don't have a lot to offer people. And I think that that's just a beautiful thing, and the truth about our human dignity, about our value and who we are just as being the people we were created to be.
Absolutely. My youngest daughter, she is making the transition this week to a new school. She's in grade 3, and yesterday at school they announced that she was leaving in a couple of days, and there was this beautiful teacher who taught her in grade 1, and she just stood there and she was very intentional, but she looked at my daughter and she said, "You have blessed me with so many things," and she just went on to describe who my daughter is as a person and her gifts and how they've blessed people around her. And when I brought her home, she just said, "Gosh, I didn't know I did that, but maybe I do have that gift." I thought, even at that tender age of 9, I guess having someone reflect your gifts back to you can be so important, can't it? Because so often we can see the gifts in others, and so often as individuals we don't see them in ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think that is a beautiful story. I just love that, because, again, you never know how those words will impact her in her life and what she believed. And that's powerful, Yes. But yes, absolutely. And I am a big believer in encouragement. And I probably in my work, I call it almost being like a strength scout, like a scout who goes to games or sports, whatever the area or the arena might be, to find people using their talents.
Yeah.
And I think there's something beautiful about looking for that in the people around us. I don't get it right all the time, but I love to tell people when they're doing something that's really impacted me, because, like you say, we don't often know it. And encouragement is so powerful because you can help people go, wow, I didn't realize that was valuable. And it could be in big and small ways. Like, honestly, the other day, as an example, I was working with one of the girls at work, and I was having to do this survey, and I loved what I was doing. I don't love creating survey or even documents on a computer, to be honest.
It's not your gift.
No, it's not my gift. And she was watching me and I think she was slightly feeling pain for me. She's like, oh, Renee, okay, can I take the computer? And I said, sure, be my guest of honor. Please take this computer. And she was like, going triple the speed I was. She's like, oh my gosh, that looks amazing. Yes, that's beautiful. Wait, can I make this even better? I'm like, please. And I am looking with clear joy on her face and kind of a bit perplexed of how could someone be enjoying this so much? But at the end, she handed it to me and we printed it out. And I looked at it and I was like, oh my goodness, thank you so much. You actually don't realize how much stress you've saved me from. Yeah. I didn't even realize you were gifted in this area, but I am so grateful to God for your gift right now because I would not have been done. And you have saved me. And she was like, if I could do that all day long, I would.
She'd be happy. Really?
So, yeah, she was like, I actually feel sickly satisfied right now. And I thought, I love it. How beautiful is that? And again, just a small everyday moment. Yeah. But she was up, it just came naturally to her. And she got this satisfaction out of seeing things done so precisely and beautifully and in the detail. And I don't find the same joy in the detail.
No. Are you a big picture dreamer?
Yes, I am. So I think there's a beauty in that, in how we complement each other, and if we allow that, then it also kind of gets rid of that need for comparison. It's like, why do we need to compare? Why can't we just enjoy that God has made us differently and celebrate the fact that, hey, I can't do this well, but you know what? Thank God for the girl on my team who just can smash it out.
Absolutely. And it strengthens relationships. I think about my marriage and early on you don't notice the differences, and then after 10 years the differences become slightly irritating at times. And then you start, you move into a new phase where you recognise, well, I have anyway, I have chosen to recognise Jonathan's unique gifts and my unique gifts. And like you said, how we can complement each other as a team and coming together in our marriage and in parenting our kids. And it's very powerful, isn't it? And I think for women especially, championing the gifts in others rather than criticising them and tearing them down, because I think that's sometimes an unredeemed aspect of womanhood that we tend to do that. But there's such strength when we come together and we're operating in our gift, we're running in our lane, and then when we see that and encourage that in others, so powerful.
It is so powerful, I think. And one of the things that drew me to the Clifton Strengths model, I mean, really, as far as practically, I think it's helpful to use anything. I'm a bit more inclined to use that because I like the language, and really where the psychology came from, it was really quite countercultural at the time because a lot of the psychology was studying what's wrong with people.
Yes.
How do we diagnose what's wrong with them? Let's fix, let's analyze the problem. Whereas the question that really started all of the research around Clifton Strengths was, what would happen if we studied what's right with people?
Yes.
And built from there. And I just think at my deepest level in my core beliefs, I think it resonated with me because more and more every day, I want to be the kind of person that says, what's good in people, what's right with people, and how can we call that out? Because you know what, we all have weaknesses, and this is not, it's also not about just ignoring our weaknesses. Obviously we need to manage that and to grow and to develop. But when we're looking at other people, we don't want to be focusing on what's wrong with you and what annoys me about you. We want to see the good in them. We want to see the God in them, I like to say,
so absolutely.
There's something innate that often when people annoy us, to be really honest, they're operating out of a strength that we just don't see the world through the same filter as somebody else. And if you can stop for a moment and go, I wonder what strength they're operating out of now.
That's a good way to look at it.
It kind of help you see people through a different light, and a light that I'd like to say I think God sees us in,
Yes, absolutely. Seeing someone with the eyes of Christ. It's so true. I love what you said about changing the focus, changing the conversation from a negative bias to a positive. when you're looking at what's right. I know in marriage, looking at relationship education, we often say that we shift the focus from resolving conflict to restoring love. Obviously, we need to resolve conflict, but sometimes we can get so caught up. Like you said, psychology became so caught up in the diagnosis of what's wrong that we forget to focus on the positive. And I also see this with women, that a lot of women get so caught up in what they can't do and what they don't have and where they're lacking, or the power struggle, instead of switching that focus around to say, okay, what is it that we actually can give? Like, what are my gifts? Where can I use them? So I'm really interested, how practically can women, I guess, tap into looking at what their unique gifts and their strengths are? Like, what are some of the practical ways women can do this?
Yeah, sure. And before I just jump into that, I just love what you were talking about, because I actually think that that's the beginning, is first of all believing that you have strengths and you have incredible gifts to offer the world. Yeah. And I think the way I kind of refer to it is, one's almost a scarcity mentality, that often when I work with groups and I say, these are the talents in the group, the first thing people say is, oh, look, we don't have this or we don't have that. And we jump straight to the negative. Or if a kid brings home a report card and they've got 4 A's and 2 D's, where is a parent going to focus? Often we're drawn to the D's instead of going, wow, look at you being amazing in maths or in art. And how can I help you, foster that natural love that you have? And, so I think it's a little bit about looking in at ourselves and daring to believe God has created me in his own image, and I can reflect something. I do reflect beautiful things on this earth, and he has given me gifts and he has created me with a purpose. And I think just believing that, and then is a beautiful, and that to me is switching from that scarcity mentality to the abundance of mentality of going, what has God given me? And that's just, a bit more of a mindset, I guess, as you begin this journey. And then just some practical things. First of all, as I said, beginning with that mindset. Another is, I do recommend assessments. I know some people are really partial, or, some people are really against them. And I just want to, and I get it, because the truth is that no words, no language can capture the intricate creation of a human being.
Of course. But they are very helpful. Like, they're very helpful and insightful. I know I did one a couple of years ago and I was like, oh my goodness, this describes me. Oh my gosh, now I understand, like, from a young girl in our suburb at 8 years of age, organising the neighbourhood kids to put on a radio station and doing like the Christmas extravaganza concerts with the 8 cousins. Every year we did like a musical for the 2 families. It was hilarious. And we had wardrobe changes and, it became so elaborate. It was ridiculous. We had to rehearse before Christmas. And then going on through, my adolescence and then my early 20s in ministry, but now the work that I'm doing, it was like when I did this assessment, it was like, my life makes sense, of course. I'm creative, I'm entrepreneurial, I'm a visionary, I'm very pastoral, like all the things that people might have reflected or things that I've been drawn to suddenly came together and they made sense. So I think I agree with you. They're immensely powerful.
And I'm going to go to something now that we like to call, Gallup kind of uses as their way of identifying. They call it the 5 clues to talent. And I find it just a really practical way to get this insight. And one of it is yearnings. So the first one is yearnings, and the 5 clues is, and often you see it like what you were talking about early in life, things that you were naturally curious about, you were naturally drawn to, and they kind of describe it as an internal force, something almost that's like a magnetic attraction to something, that you're drawn back to, and you think, I'd love to do that again. And maybe those same activities energize you, because what energizes you is not going to be the same as what energizes someone else. So paying attention to those yearnings, or like what you say, things that you did or you're drawn to as a child, and try and think about that. What do you think it was that drew you to that particular thing that brought you life, or that enabled you to run the concerts that you're able to do?
Yes, and those kind of gifts, that's it, isn't it? I love that. So tell me, what are the other 5? Do you know them off the top of your head?
So yearnings is the first one. Rapid learning is another clue to talent. Yes, and no doubt, I'm sure, without even knowing, I'm sure you have probably books on the go or things you love to learn about that feed that element in you, and you get life and you just want to keep reading. And, you know, I know lots of people like that. And if reading's not your thing, then sometimes it's however you learn, or fun things like cooking, or you like to look up dancing, and it's beautiful, again, because I know people who are like this, and anything they cook tastes amazing. And they have people over in their homes, or they bring things over, and it really genuinely is a blessing. And again, not to underestimate the ministry. Like, we don't need to be in a form of ministry. Like, we all have our own personal ministry in ways which we bring life and serve the world around us. So
absolutely.
Where do you have that? And I think it's also it helps of what activities take longer for you to master. So again, cooking might be really strenuous and take forever, and you know, you're just not finding the same ease or joy that somebody else might. And that goes for any area. You know, maybe it's, I don't know, strategic thinking, and you can really quickly think of a great strategy in the way forward, and that naturally comes to your brain. Like, that is a gift that you can share and help others with. So yearnings, rapid learning. The next one is flow. And that's a lot of, I guess it's timelessness as well. You know, when you're doing something and the hours just pass and you barely even notice, or, you know, you're just really in the zone. Some of you might reference that in. You're just really engaged at that deep natural level. And that's often a sign that you are operating out of a talent. And in reverse, when things feel like they can take forever. So back to my example before, you know, when I'm at work and I have people meetings or I'm giving presentations, or the day just flies. Like, it flies, and I feel I've got energy at the end of the day. I love it, you know. Even if I'm tired physically, I'm usually not as drained. If I have spent my whole day at the computer doing detailed work and admin, like, I feel every hour as it passes, you know.
I hear you.
That's not to say, and I think this is really important for me to say in the midst of this, it's not to say, I find my gifts and I only work in that. Like, obviously we still have to get things done and do what needs to be done. And
I think that's a really good point to make, that we still need to, we don't just stick to what we're good at either, do we? It's that growth mindset.
That's right. That's right. And it's good to do things that we need to do, and we probably learn new skills in that. But I think what the point is, where you're going to find the most life and where you want to place yourself in most intentionally, most often, is in that area of strength where God's naturally gifted you. So the fourth thing is glimpses of excellence. You know, so moments where you see, wow, I can do that, and I can do that well. Or maybe people really compliment you on something and they notice that. Or you're asked to give advice. Sometimes I say to people, wait, what do people ask you advice for? Or do they come to you for, and get your perspective on this? It's probably a glimpse of excellence in that you can do that area well, you know. Like, I think of just an event recently where it needed beautiful environment, and we just called upon a couple of the girls who were so gifted in that area. And it wasn't until I thought about it, I'm like, you're really excellent at what you do. You have the ability to transform a setting and make it beautiful and make it inviting. And that enhances the whole experience for everyone else. So again, just taking these seemingly little things where people might be, I'm just making things pretty. It's like, but not everyone can just make things pretty. That's your eye and your ability and your gift at work here, and it's impacting the world around you, you know. And the final one is satisfaction. So you kind of, after doing it, you feel that sense of satisfaction. Like the example I used before, after she had created that page, there was, I loved doing, you know. And again, very revealing there is what brings me satisfaction and what brings you satisfaction are probably two different things. And so it helps to pay attention. And sometimes things that I recommend to people, if they're really on this journey of trying to discover, you know, what are my gifts and how do I use that, is maybe even starting a journal, or just start by paying attention to the things that you do. And at the end of the day, notice what activities brought you life. Notice what you did that time just passed easily, or notice what you did that people complimented you or thanked you on, or were like, I'm so glad you were there because none of us could have done that. Those things are really good clues into your own gifts and talents. So again, those 5 things are yearning, rapid learning, glimpses of excellence, satisfaction, and flow. I think that they're 5 things that are just really practical to kind of look into. And I think another aspect of that is ask friends. They see a lot and they know. Or I dare you to ask your husband, even, if you really want a good, honest answer.
So, but it's true. I think, asking your friends is a really good one because they do reflect back to you the truth, I guess, of who you are. And I think particularly for younger women, like discerning, I guess, the areas, like young women who are finishing up Year 12, for example, or at university and looking at their career. Often young people go into a job or a degree because they think that's what they should do. And I think all of what you're saying and clearly the way you parent your own children, and we do this with our kids, is really helping them discover their own, passions and their gifts.
Yeah, and I think it builds in a self-confidence because, as you're saying before, too often we focus on what we're not, what we don't have, rather than really focusing on, God's given me this. How can I use this? How can I multiply this and give it away and find life in the same time, And I think that's really beautiful. I think another way to find out is, what are the dreams on your heart? What are the little whispers? Often we have those whispers inside of us that are drawing us to something, or we have this, secret or not so secret desire to do something in our lives. Well, what gifts does it take to accomplish that? Because often it's the gifts that you've been given,
Absolutely.
You're not drawing your dreams, your custom-made dreams for no reason,
That's right.
and they're there for a reason, and they're probably because in your makeup, you have that ability that God's given you, the gifts, even if you feel like, maybe they're not where you want them to be. Maybe they've been dormant because you haven't been using them, or you've been afraid to. But pay attention to those little dreams. Let them come out and write them out and start to see if there are patterns in what you're journaling or writing down, because usually there are. And pay attention to that and start, I guess my final thing is, start to live that out even in the smallest of ways. Yes. It doesn't have to be in big ways. Try and look for ways you can do it in just little everyday moments. Yeah. And you'll start to build that confidence and build that life and continue to step out in that. And that's where I feel like life starts to expand and open up and bring that joy and that fullness that we long for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. Honestly, you have an enormous gift in this area, and it's just such a joy to talk with you and catch up and share life with you. I'm so grateful. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Karen. It's been a joy to talk with you. I just feel like time's passed.
I know. It's so good.
I was saying it's been so nice to talk to you, and I just want to thank you again for using your gifts, because I think this is really valuable, and excited for this initiative as well. I think you're doing really amazing things that are really going to bless women especially. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Renee. Well, God bless you. I hope you have a good rest of the day, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. God bless you too.
Well, I don't know about you, but I feel completely pumped after any conversation with that woman. She's incredible. I love spending time with Renee, and I come away totally inspired. If you like what you've heard and want to go deeper to discover your purpose and your strengths and how you might use these, why not head on over to the Genius Project, www.geniusproject.co, and take a look at the range of online courses that are available to help and support women like you craft their gift and step into their calling. The next Genius course launches in June. You don't want to miss it. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, and if you like what you've heard, please share the link with your friends and follow the Genius Project on social media. Next week, we will unpack some of the roadblocks that we as women face and how we can overcome them. Until then, have a beautiful week and God bless you.